Welcome to the latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon's Corner. This evening, we're going to be talking about the truth. So, with us tonight are Dan Thomas.
Hello.
There you are, Dan. Merrick Moses.
Buenos tardes.
So, when I hosted my radio show, Bridging the Gap in Alaska several years back, one of the topics we discussed was the truth, because back then, this was in the middle of the Trump presidency, I was starting to become alarmed at the effect his lies were having on our democracy. And in one of the questions to the panel, I wondered if the First Amendment right to free speech needed to be re-examined because it has protected lying, where we were headed to the point of being in danger of losing our democratic republic. I also asked the panel that day if they would favor some type of legal accountability for someone who publicly lies. The panel unanimously stood against making lying an unlawful act, and with solid reasoning showed why that would lead us down another very dangerous road. However, with the knowledge that we all have now of the big lie that Donald Trump actually won the 2020 presidential election, I thought this might not be a bad time to revisit that particular question. We know that Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny are lies, but none of us want to throw parents in prison for telling their children to be good because a lump of coal may be the only thing they might otherwise get for Christmas. Donald Trump, however, told his lie over and over and used that lie to try to overthrow the government. Do you think there should be any legal ramifications for lying? And if so, would you recommend that how would you recommend those ramifications be implemented? Is lying going to be okay, and should we make it illegal? I guess is my question. Merrick, what do you think?
I think that's a slippery slope. And from my understanding, you would have to prove intent. If this person was really lying or not, or giving information they thought was true, it would just be a slippery slope. And I do have a fear that a law of that nature would have an adverse effect on Black Lives Matter and movements that are for social justice.
Okay, how would lying have an adverse effect on them? How would protecting lying have an adverse effect on them?
Because they could always allege that, let's say, a person from Black Lives Matter was publicly lying and encouraging the crowd to do something, right? Sound familiar, right? And they could be prosecuted for that if that was a law. And what I also know is that in history, we see that oftentimes these laws are disproportionately levied against Black and brown people. So that's my concern.
Okay, your fear is that law, if it was a law, would be utilized adversely against certain populations.
Yes.
Okay, Dan, what do you think about lying?
Well,
Legal ramifications for lying.
well, there's already a network of legal ramifications set up. There's slander, there's libel laws. You're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater. You're not allowed, it's specifically a crime to incite a riot. So there are things that you're not allowed to say even under the auspices of free speech. And there are, in the case
but lying isn't one of them, though, is it?
Well, what do you think? What do you think libel and slander are?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got a point there.
Yeah. But you have to prove within our system. You do have to prove, like Merrick said, intent, and then you also have to prove harm.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's go back to libel and slander. Say Donald Trump lies about winning the election. He didn't libel or slander anybody.
Well, he slandered Joe Biden. It's libel if he writes it down. It's slander if he just says it.
So you think his lie that he won the election libels
his
Joe
claim
Biden?
is that he is slandering Joe Biden. He is saying things that are untrue about Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi. He is saying things about these people that are untrue. It is the very definition of slander. Now, that in and of itself is not legal, but in order to penalize him in any way, Joe and Kamala and Nancy and Adam, they need to prove that they were harmed in some capacity. Now, I think that the insurrection was definitely harmful to Nancy Pelosi, to Adam Schumer, to Kamala Harris, to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, all these people that he said horrible things about who were in that building when he sent his people after them. I do think it undermines the ability to get justice done when his attempts to assassinate his own vice president. Mike Pence has not broken free from that abusive relationship yet and is still defending Trump, even though Trump supporters built a gallows and were going to hang him. He still hasn't figured out where that's going.
So you think that the lie that Donald Trump said qualifies as slander against these particular people, so they're already against the law. I don't know if we're talking criminal or civil, already against the law, so they could take action, legal action against him should they choose to do so. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Joe Biden is very big on the spirit of forgiveness. The others are a little too classy to waste their time figuring that Trump will be exonerated, so they're not going to take that action. But I know the companies that Trump and Giuliani slandered over the big lie are suing the hell out of them. Billion-dollar lawsuits against Trump, against Giuliani, against Fox News, against ONN or OAN, whatever that Jesus network is, where they just praise Donald Trump.
One American Network, OAN.
Yeah, they're all going to be in court, and they are going to be paid financially for the big lie that they helped promote. I do not know if Trump will ever have his day in court. Like Merrick said, you have to be able to prove intent. And if you can't prove that he actually understood that he was not telling the truth, and I don't know,
it'd be hard to prosecute. If he believes it, he can't say it's a lie.
Having watched him speak, I honestly believe that he believes some of the things that he is saying. I do not believe, I know he doesn't believe all of them. I know he made a deliberate, conscious choice to lie about the severity of COVID because he felt like it would hurt his reelection chances. And I do think that he should be criminally prosecuted for that. And his excuse of, I didn't want to start a panic, the guy who said that Mexican drug gangs are caravanning through Central America to come and kill you if you let the Democrats win in the 2018 elections. That's not a guy who gives a shit about preventing a panic. So I do believe that we can prosecute, that he should be prosecuted for the lie he told about COVID and how he responded to it.
There is a process in place called fact checking. When someone makes a public statement and some news organization announces whether it is true or not. How effective do you think fact checking is in keeping accurate the information that is dispersed to the public arena? And do you think there might be a better way to keep public officials from making statements that are not true? Something beyond fact checking. Dan?
I'm not sure how we make them. I'm not sure how we improve on the process, but I really think that I think this is going to sound contradictory. Fact checking is extremely important. It is also highly ineffective. Because if the people who are listening to the message and being exposed to the accurate facts don't believe the source of the fact checking, it doesn't matter how much facts you check. I remember back in 2016 when Hillary Clinton said on the debate stage, "We're going to be fact checking Donald in real time." And she said it with arrogance and smarm and the expression of someone who knew that she had won the fight already because she believed it. And I did not criticize her for that moment. I thought that was a great piece of political theater. I thought that was very important. I also did not believe that there was any chance in hell that we were going to look at Hermione Granger and the guy who sells fake Rolexes on the corner and say, "Let's pick the con man." I really didn't think we were that stupid. But it turns out that her fact checking meant absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things. I still think it was important that she did it. Someone needs to challenge on the untruth. And when Donald Trump in particular, if the reporter pushes back on him, he just gets up and leaves the interview. He doesn't do hard questions. He's done that multiple times. He thinks Savannah Guthrie's a bully. That nice man from Axios with the those dear facial expressions when he
Jonathan
was
Swan.
So hard. Yeah. Like, he does not tolerate hard questions. He likes nice, easy softball questions that appeal to his ego. So if the reporters do not push back on him in those cases, but they need to. They really, really need to. And they're not going to go easy on Joe Biden like that. Joe Biden might get frustrated and he might say malarkey or something, but he'll answer the question. He's not going to storm out. Donald Trump would just storm out, and the reporters wanted to get as much out of the interview as they could, so they didn't push back and would fact check retroactively. By then, it's already too late. You need to push back during the conversation.
Merrick, Dan thinks fact checking is a good thing, but very ineffective. What do you think?
I would agree with him. And when we look at a person like the former guy, the former president, he lies in rapid fire. So when the fact checkers check it, it's so hard for them to keep up with him because he's regurgitating these things at a quick clip. That being said, I think that we need to understand that a good third of the country lives in a whole different reality. And he has sold these people a bill of goods. And I believe that nothing would sway a good portion of those people. They really live in an alternative universe. And I don't know what we could do with that. I mean, and I also think they are very cult-like. It's like a cult. It's a personality cult. And how do you get people out of cults? That's my question. How do you get them out of the cult?
As he kept trying to feed me more, speaking of cults, more lies about voter fraud, I told my Trump-loving relative that the internet is a cesspool. Metaphor is not a lie. We on this panel, as well as most of the nation, and the planet are connected to the internet. We're all addicted to it. It's a real problem when the web is used as a vehicle for disinformation by forces promoting a particular political agenda. There have been calls for regulating the internet, which is already done in China. Do you support internet regulation by government statute? How would you do it if it was up to you? Now, I said that China thing with sort of tongue in cheek. I'm not advocating the kind of regulation of the internet that they do in China, but they do regulate it in China.
Take it a step farther. Do it the way they are in Myanmar.
Which is don't let anybody be on it at all, or don't. How do they regulate it in Myanmar?
Well, they turn it off at night to start with, because that's when people are going to be most likely to be planning their counter protests and insurrections. So it just goes away.
Okay, before I get to Merrick, let's finish with you. Would you think there's any? I mean, without discussing Myanmar, do you think there's any way it can be regulated in a beneficial manner?
I do and do not. I think the social media platforms are where you're going to get your meat and potatoes regulation. Um, because no offense, and I know that you are not on Facebook, but I also know that you could figure out Facebook enough to use it.
But I choose not to.
You choose not to, but that's a conscious choice you make. You would be able to use it if you chose to.
Right. I have the capability. Desire. I have the technical capability. Sure.
Yeah. You do not have the technical capability to go down rabbit holes on the dark web. And if I can't figure out Reddit, I know you can't figure out Reddit. So
no desire to.
You're gonna be able to get most of your regulation done on the social media platforms, the Twitters, the Facebooks, the Reddits, the Snapchats, YouTubes. They all have terms of service. I think that we need to make sure that their terms of service are enforced, and these platforms are all owned by large tech corporations. Like Facebook and Twitter themselves are large tech corporations, but like YouTube is owned by Google. So if Google is facing heavy financial losses for enabling the spread of misinformation on YouTube, they're going to put a stop to it as soon as they track it down. So I do think that content can be monitored.
Okay, you're talking basically terms of service now. So what would have to go into the terms of service agreement that would be able to enforce that?
That you are not going to knowingly spread misinformation, and if your stuff gets flagged for inciting violence, spreading misinformation, racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic.
Okay, so you're saying actually put those. Now,
yeah.
Here's my next question, though. You would suggest that the government would enforce that kind of language in their terms of service? Are you in favor of that?
I would be okay with the government enforcing that language in the terms of service, but you have to make it hit the business. If the business is the one who is going to lose the money, then the business will regulate it all by themselves, as long as the penalty is substantial. If Facebook gets flagged for this post is racist, you got to take it down, and they don't do it, then Facebook has to face the consequences for that even more than the individual poster. And once Facebook has paid out a few $1 billion in fines, Facebook will make sure that the negative content goes away.
So if you're talking about fines now, you're talking about government imposed fines, right?
Correct.
That wouldn't be in your terms of service. That would be a law, a statute that the government passed saying that if you don't do it this way, Facebook, you're going to get fined by us.
Well, your question is about regulating the internet.
So you're in favor of that as well. You're in favor of that as well. Okay. All right, Merrick, Dan laid out quite a bit for us to ponder. What's your view about government regulation of the internet?
I'm in agreement with the fines because unfortunately, people really believe almost everything they read online. And the excuse is, well, where'd you get that from? The internet, right? So I do think that fines would work. I also think that they should break up these tech monopolies. I definitely think they need to do that. And because that would create competition, of course. And I think it would just improve these platforms if they had for real competition. That being said, I think that Congress needs to come up with a way to hold these folks accountable. And I say that because so much craziness is passed on into the internet and people are acting on it. That is a danger to national security. I don't think people understand how dangerous this is. This lie, this big lie that the former guy has perpetrated literally led to an insurrection, right? And we don't know what's coming down the pike. We don't know what terrorist militia he has inspired to do whatever through his lies. And for me, Twitter did not cut him off fast enough because he's been lying the whole time. It's only when there was bloodshed that, okay, you got to cut him off. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. He was spreading lies on Twitter massively.
And not to
Exactly.
interrupt, but I'm going to interrupt because of your point about Twitter. The tweets that they actually said these violate our terms of service, like those were some bullshit softball tweets. Those were completely innocuous compared to everything else he said for the last 10 years. So they were really itching for that excuse, and they didn't want to answer the question of why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this when you said Mexicans were rapists? Why didn't you do this when you were advocating for murdering these people? Why didn't you do this then? It was only when they were looking for an excuse to do it, and then they just picked basically random.
Hey, I just got a note from the producer who wants you guys to answer the question about Uncle Sam becoming the thought police with this particular issue. Is there any danger of the government being so willing to protect us that they end up stifling free speech on the internet? What do you think, Dan?
Well, I think that a lot of Republican slippery slope arguments about freedom are just paranoid fever dreams. I don't think that we're ever going to get that far. I do think that we do need to look at things like your writings are radicalizing people and causing them to go out and shoot up mosques, for example. We look at that stuff now and we make an effort to punish it, to observe it, to follow it, to hold people accountable. I don't know how successful we are, but if you have somebody writing the inflammatory things on the internet and seems to be getting a following, I promise you the FBI is paying attention. Whether or not anything comes of it is a different question, but we're already being the thought police. But you have to have evidence of a crime or intent to commit a crime. So I don't think that we are going to stifle anyone's real free speech. But when we flag ISIS recruitment videos, I don't think that's a thing anymore since ISIS lost the caliphate. But those would be easily identified, and those would be restricted and removed. That's the same thing.
I think you're saying
that
the threshold potential for the threshold should be the potential for violence. We need to stop that shit as soon as we see it.
Yes.
Okay. Merrick, what do you think about that? You're afraid about our libertarian producer saying that the thought police is going to come get us if we let Uncle Sam do this?
The thought police has already gotten some of us, right? So I think about the Black Panthers and how they were infiltrated. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference, under the direction of Dr. King, inserted this idea of the thought police because he was espousing egalitarian thoughts. Then the propaganda came out that he was a communist. So communities have seen this before, and how do you get rid of the thought police? Because this has stifled many Black and Brown Americans, and so what we need to do is we really need to take a long, hard look at ourselves and ask ourselves, why are people believing craziness on the internet? I personally blame the American educational system and the lack of development of critical thought processes that is developed with good education. That's where we are. People people really believe everything they see on Facebook is true. And that's really crazy. It's really crazy.
So they don't have the education to discern the nonsense from what's real. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, many people don't. Like, for instance, right, when we talk about storming the Capitol, people took that literally, that they were going to storm the Capitol, right? And so there was stuff on Facebook promoting this and promoting this. So it snowballed into a disaster. And I believe that a lot of people just don't have the critical thought apparatus to think these things through. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. They not even there. They still trying to figure out what A is.
After the Senate vote of 57 to convict and 43 Republicans to acquit resulted in an acquittal of his impeachment trial, Mitch McConnell made the most profound example of hypocrisy I believe I have ever witnessed. In that speech, right after the vote to acquit, came another big lie. He stated that Donald Trump was legally guilty but constitutionally innocent, which is why Moscow Mitch voted not guilty. The truth is that McConnell voted to acquit because he needs Trump and Trump's base, as well as big donors, to help reelect those Republican senators of the 43 who voted not guilty, so he can regain his status as majority leader. Will this latest McConnell lie work as designed? Merrick, how successful do you think McConnell's going to be with this lie?
It's going to be successful to the base. We all know that he's a BSer. We all know that he's a liar. I mean, if there was an example of Satan and Beelzebub had a child, that would be Mitch McConnell. And so I think you're absolutely right. He's depending on Trump, the former guy, to bring home the bacon in terms of dollars and in terms of people. I'm not surprised that he chose to acquit. The Republican Party, as it stands today, is a party of sedition and lies. And so he's flip-flopped on that as well about the culpability of Trump. One day he says he's responsible, the next day, maybe not. And so anything coming out of his mouth is suspect. If he told me it was raining, I would look outside, then I would check the weather report because he's such a liar.
And you'd go by the weather report for sure.
Oh, or absolutely.
What's happened outside, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Republican Party seditionist Dan. That's what Merrick thinks. He's not the only one, too.
I think that they have definitely become very anti-democratic, especially because their election strategy is suppressing the vote of people who don't generally vote for them. And there are women and minorities and LGBT people who vote Republican, who have that vested interest in doing so. But since traditionally these groups do vote for Democrats, they do not want them to vote. Like, well, they'll cut off the Ben Carsons and the Caitlyn Jenners if that means that the rest of the population and their demographics don't have a voice, because that means they'll continue to win. So I definitely think they're anti-democratic. I don't think they want to leave the country. I just think that they want to rule it unopposed and do horrible, horrible things to the rest of us.
But you have to admit, though, that whenever, 130 of them vote to overturn the election, the day of the insurrection, which wanted to stop that vote, that's sort of seditious, though. That's not really.
It is sedition.
Yeah,
well,
don't you think, Dan?
They're definitely trying to overturn the will of the people, which they were all about in 2016. And if you ask any Trump supporter in 2016, oh, he's the people's president. I'm like, no. Hillary Clinton is the people's president. Al Gore was the people's president, because those are the presidents that the people selected to lead them. So yeah, they are definitely trying to overthrow democracy. That's not really a question. But they want to keep the current structure. They don't want to build anything new. They want to keep the current structure as is, and they feel like they've let too many undeserving, undesirable people in and have power, and they're trying to correct that.
They
In part
also
one,
are afraid of
oh,
the
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mary.
They also are, I'm sorry, they also are afraid of the demographic time bomb, and they know that they are outnumbered. And that's so fearful. This is why we get this fearful rhetoric. They're coming from South America, they're coming over in ships. The Africans are taking planes over here. They know that their time is up, and they are looking to fascism to save them. That's what it is. When you don't want democracy and you want somebody to rule by fiat, that is fascism.
By definition. I want to thank Merrick, Brother Merrick Moses, Dan, Mike. Appreciate you guys. Thank you all for listening. Goodbye.